Terror threat highest ever. NOPD gets its man. I'm Michael Toscano. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee says the threat of terrorism is the highest it's ever been, including right after 9/11. California Republican Devin Nunes telling CBS's Face the Nation that's because the internet makes it easier to recruit Americans, and this, he says, in an especially critical time.
There will be thousands and thousands of people out to watch the fireworks, and then this will happen in every city, every community across America. So it's just tough to secure those types of areas if you have someone who wants to blow themselves up or open fire.
New Orleans police have captured the man they say shot and killed police officer Darrell Holloway in his cruiser yesterday. 33-year-old Travis Boyce still had broken handcuffs on his wrists. Believe he got his hands free enough to grab a gun and shoot the officer. Mayor Mitch Landrieu.
I want to be clear about this. When you kill a police officer in the line of duty, it is an attack on the entire community, personally and as a city. And that is not who we are in the city of New Orleans.
I'm Michael Toscano. Charleston's Emmanuel AME Church reopened its doors for Sunday service this morning. The community coming to grips with the racially inspired massacre that claimed 9 lives in the church. Martin Savage is there.
There was times that there was open weeping, and there was times where people were up on their feet dancing in the pews. One woman I spoke to, who was a longtime parishioner, simply said it helped, but the pain is still there because it simply runs too deep.
As 1,400 firefighters struggle to contain the massive lake fire east of Los Angeles, another one has broken out.
A new wildfire is burning in central California, about 200 miles north of Los Angeles. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection says the Park Hill fire has burned 1,200 acres and destroyed 2 structures since it broke out east of Santa Margarita around 2:30 yesterday afternoon. The fire is 15% contained. I'm Bill Michaels.
The final round of the U.S. Open is underway. The matchup of the top 4 still to come. I'm Michael Toscano.
Johnny wants to be a performer, and everybody knows school costs money. Johnny wants to know what he has to do to become a performer. Plus, he needs experience before he decides to spend the money for school. Johnny's confused. He has no one to talk to about his choices. He then hears an ad on the radio about Media8tor Arts Academy, where he can perform, network, train, and find a place to prepare for school. Johnny has found a place to expand his talents to make his decision and also increase his resume. Now, let's explain how Johnny got signed up. He went online to Media8inc.com and clicked on register. They called him back, asked him what his vision was, then found a place for him to perform. Whether it's theater, music, or movies, as long as Johnny is willing, Media8inc.com is able. And that's the story of how Johnny became a performer through Media8 Arts Academy.
Actor-director Angelina Jolie speaking out about what she calls an explosion of human suffering. She's been in southeast Turkey for World Refugee Day in her capacity as a UN Special Envoy, and she makes it clear she thinks the international community isn't doing enough for refugees.
We must protect them and invest in them. They are not a problem. They are a part of the solution to this global crisis.
It's Father's Day, a time to honor Dad and spend some money.
Spending in the U.S. for Father's Day is expected to reach about $12.7 billion, with over 3/4 of Americans planning to celebrate Father's Day by spending, on average, about $115 a person. And while dads will receive about 52% of the gifts, nearly 28% of husbands expect to get a gift, along with 9% of sons. And according to the study, most of the shopping, just over 36%, will be done at a department store, while just over 29% are going to shop online. I'm John Stolnis.
And I'm Michael Toscano.
Have you ever thought about publishing a book, but just didn't know how to do it? Well, at Media8, we try to make publishing simple. You ask questions, we give you answers. You want a book? We find the right option for you to publish. When you need advice about getting your methods out to the world, Media8 is the place to call. Register today at Media8inc.com, where we make ideas seem simple.
This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now. It was a nightmare.
Flight 807, you're clear for landing. Runway 7, Bravo. All personnel report to the nearest tornado shelter. This is not a drill.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The mediator is here.
All doctors to the ER. All nurses to the nurses station. Code blue 305. 10-4 engine, 5 engine, 3 is en route. Shots fired, shots fired. Officer down. I repeat, officer down. 911, what's your emergency? Backup is en route.
Evacuations continue tonight in Maribel.
Apartments, you can see this evacuation notice on one door.
Rolling, motion, roll sound, and action.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ohioans, Pennsylvanians, Americans, welcome to The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West. We have my man, Marlin Jones, on the line today. Marlin, are you there?
Hey, Hey, Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. Now, we are talking about Father's Day today. We're talking about manhood in the 21st century. For you people out there, the manhood has always been a definition that has been miscued in this new environment. A lot of people have been trying to find the answers to, or the definition of what is a man. Is a man that person who goes and wins 10 NBA championships, 20 football championships, and gets about over 50,000 yards on the field? Or is a man someone who stays at home, raises his children, cooks for the family, takes the family out? So we got my man Marlin Jones. He is the author of The Definition of a Man, a book about poetry in tune with his own self as a man. Now, Marlin, how are you? How are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm pretty good. Excited. I thank you for coming on the show today. Now, you wrote about in your pieces here. It seems like you get very intimate in the side that men don't really express, which is poetry. Why choose the field of writing and as your desired outlet?
Well, honestly, I don't know if it was something I consciously thought of. I think just through probably the circumstances that led me to writing was more of a therapeutic avenue, which in turn some people describe as poetry. But so I think it was kind of that thing that kind of really just kind of perpetuated some of my writings that are very poetic, I guess, in many respects. But I don't know if it was something I consciously decided to do. So, yeah.
Now, I looked at some numbers here, and they say that the amount of men that are actually still around the family in the family environment is a crisis in the American culture and in the American environments. They say 24 million children in America live in a house where there is just a single parent, and they talk about the research where it talks about how these children develop over the years. Now, you say that writing was an outlet for you in situations that you had to battle. Talk a little bit about that. Why do you think writing is so therapeutic in a sense for a man?
Well, I think, as you look at society today, versus having a conversation versus action, as you see, I think statistically, I think it states that African-American homes, I think that number is like anywhere between 75 and 80%.
Yeah.
Run by single-parent homes, which is so unfortunate. So typically what you see nowadays, you see our children out in the street, you see them involved in so many different things that are not productive with respect to moving them forward, nor society. So, so there is a stereotype of typically what we see in movies, what we see on TV, and what we hear. So I think for me, writing was more productive because if I write it down, at least I had the ability to go back and look at what I wrote, and then kind of reflect a little bit as to why I wrote what I wrote. So for me, yes.
I was going to say, did it make you do you think it made you a better man in the long run?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have kids of my own, and one thing we used to say to them was, use your words. Like, words are powerful. The Bible says, there's life and death in the tongue, so we have to be careful of the things that we say.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're using those in a positive light more so than a negative light.
Now you talk. You use. You seem. When I read your poetry, it's almost like you're intimate. You find a side of you that needs to be like an outlet. And most men, and just I talk about women who have journals. Most men, they may either become rappers or they may they try to become verbal or they might become reverends. But you chose to write yours down and publish it in a sense to where this was your desire. So most men have that problem where they don't know where. Like let me give you an example. This guy, the guy who did the in the news right now, the guy who went into the church and shot these people in the congregation, and he had all this bottled up inside of him. And we have all different types of outlets in this new environment where men can go. We can talk to reverends, we can talk to pastors, we can talk to anybody about our problems. Do you think that when a man bottles so much up inside of him and he does not either work out or do something, what is a way for a man to release what is actually inside of him, Marlin?
But I think the pictures of what we see on TV of what a man is supposed to be is truly the opposite of who I think that I am.
Yeah.
I think a man is more in terms of, movies and radio, they're like this physical presence. Although that may be true, but, in everything that we do, there's communication. So I think for me, having the ability to communicate in ways that hopefully we all can identify serves a purpose. Because I often say that we're all poets. I think we all say the same things. We just say them in 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
So that aspect of being a man and being in touch with this emotional side is what the media doesn't perpetuate. It doesn't show that. Maybe it's not the trend of the day. Maybe it's not bringing in financial gain of some sort. But, look at the men that are in history that were great communicators, like Martin Luther King and, Moses back in the biblical days.
Yes.
All this was done through communication and written down of words that we use to get people's attention, to change history in a sense.
So it sounds like... I was going to say, so it sounds like what you're saying is that the definition of a man is actually what he is on the inner being, meaning like if he's a nurturer, if he's a provider, if he's a good communicator, then that outlet, he has to have an outlet to, but let's get into this a little bit, because now some men take their anger out in certain ways. It's almost like an operation of power here, where there's a power structure. Correct. Like when you look at the guy, who just did what he did, he seemed to have a passion for supremacy in the sense to where, or Martin Luther King, where he has a passion for his people and he wants to liberate, not just liberate them, but get them out of segregation. So when you see these men I would say maybe the alpha spirit, where they have, I wouldn't say but they're chosen to be leaders. Some men, I think, become either envious or they want to be in those positions. But now we're talking about men in a sense to where we're talking about men in the fatherly sense, like men that we see in our everyday lives. Like you may see somebody who's just an ordinary, like let me give an example. My Uncle Johnny, he was a very kind-hearted man, but he could not find a way to bring in revenue and support his family. So it was hard for him to maintain his family structure when he could not provide. And I think that's where we're at right now when it comes to manhood, is that people are saying things about certain men, but the thing is what does a man have to do to provide for his family when well needed? You know what I'm saying?
I do. Absolutely.
So, give me your take on it. What I guess what I'm asking is what do you feel a man should do in a sense to where he has to provide? And do you take drastic measures, or do you, what is your definition of that?
Well, I don't think you necessarily have to take drastic measures. I think, life happens to us all, and some things that work for others may not work for us. So I think in that regard, it's just something that, you have to kind of get over and continue to do. I think those that do great things in society and in their personal lives, have the greatest perseverance. You know, I think a fact of believing in yourself and what you do will at some point pave the way to success. Now, you know, everybody say, you know, success by their own definition means different things to different people. And I completely understand that. But in terms of supporting a family, you know, the greatest thing to do is to fall down and never get back up.
Yeah.
So that, in a sense, can be, you know, misconstrued as a failure. But, you know, I think we all have those things that we say, man, like, that we think that was the greatest challenge. But getting through that challenge, it will be the greatest success at the same time. So it's not so much of not necessarily getting that job or this promotion that we think is going to be great for us, but I think it's those things that challenge us that make us that much more better.
Good. That's real good. Now, Solomon, I think when you talk about in the biblical sense, King Solomon defined wisdom and he defined manhood as some things are just meaningless, meaning like when you live life and you obtain material possessions, in the end, it's all meaningless and it's all meaningless.
Absolutely.
Now, you have children. You have a daughter and a son. Am I correct?
I do, correct. Yes.
Now, how do you? I know I told you about the statistics when it talks about how certain men are not when they grow up and the man is not around. Now, you've been through a lot. I read your I read your book and I read the bio that you have here. Right. Now, talk a little bit about that when you have to, like you said, when you face trials as a man. I did read a lot about that in your poems. You say it defies you. It either makes you or breaks you. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, the basis for my writings come from kind of a bittersweet circumstance. My brother, who is a year older than me, passed away, and he died after a kidney transplant. So I don't know if you've noticed in the 2 books that I currently have published that I give a dedication to him.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of keeping his spirit alive. So that is my motivation for doing the things that I do. Mm-hmm. Definitely is keeping his memory alive. So that's very important. So your question was, what is the? Explain to me again, what were you asking?
Well, I mean, the basis. I mean, how you define like let's use an example. We're talking about men. This is a manly show today. Now, when you talk about like guys like Michael Jordan, like this is like the epiphany moment where he's faced with a good team. You know, he's on the NBA team, and it's the Bulls. And his father, he loses his fatherly figure. I use Michael Jordan as a good example because I thought that was a pretty inspirational story. I mean, then you have other stories too where men face some amazing things, and you have all different types of legacies here. So in this journey, you know, the Bulls seem to be a pretty good team. You got some pretty key players, but he comes back in the league and he wins the title. And then you got like we'll use Tiger Woods too. Tiger Woods, in a sense, he loses his father, and everybody, you know, his back is against the wall. So when you see things like that as a man, you know, this is why I like your stories a little bit, because you took I read about your father, and it talks about your brother. I was in the Navy, so I can vouch for that. Hoorah! So you talk about how you lost your brother, and you found a way to develop yourself a championship team here. You decided to put your words on paper, and in that, it seemed to make you feel like it was your obligation to be a better man in life. Is that correct?
It is, but, you know, I also thought, too, and one thing I will say is I never went into writing expecting to put a book out. That was never my motivation in the beginning. You know, what happened was I finally looked at everything that I had written, and I guess it made for a good story. And, you know, on the front of my book, I did say that, you know, I want to captivate the reader into something that we all are familiar with, you know, of heartbreak and growing into oneself. And, you know, these have been inspired by putting my thoughts on paper. So now I'm willing to show that innermost part of me with the world and hope that it provokes thought, conversation, and to, you know, healing moving forward. Because, I think the common denominator is that we all have setbacks. We all have, you know, traumatic things that happen to each and one of us. So how do we get through that? So my thoughts were, wow, this would be an inspiration for somebody else to at least take what I've written.
Yeah.
And say, wow, like, that's exactly how I felt, but I just didn't know how to say it. So I guess it was a matter of a relationship in that sense, that people would look to my writings and say, you know what, that helped me through. That helped me understand, or that put in perspective everything that I was trying to say.
Now let's talk about women in a sense now. Okay, most women are in power positions right now. They're playing the ball field here, and most women are actually in leadership positions in the home where they're either making more than the men or they're raising kids by themselves. Now, when you look at it in that sense, when men, I mean, I have friends of my own who have to pay child support for their children, and they're bitter inside because they want to see their kids, and women are not letting them see their kids and things like that. So when you take that section of a man and it makes him bitter, and you talk about, even when you talk about these men who are joining these terrorist groups like ISIS, when they're not able to support their families because of the system they feel like is not fair, so when you look at that, Marlin, I mean, what is your take on that in the sense for in manhood?
Well, I think it is a little bit troubling. I think it is, it does set for a bad precedent the way men take care of their children. I think we have a system, and maybe that system definitely has great intention on providing for a child who obviously does not live in a home where there's a father present. I think the discouraging things are, sometimes men are kind of, and forgive my vernacular, but are raked over the coals because the system sometimes isn't fair and what we think is fair.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's always going to be the case, but I think, people are being forced, and I hate to say forced, but that's the best word that I can use right now, forced to do something that they should naturally be doing anyway. One thing we have to understand is, two people laid down to have this child.
Yeah.
So when things don't go right and people split up and a child becomes the byproduct of a failed relationship, then the right thing to do would be for the two people involved is, now we have to find a way to take care of a child that I think in the beginning that we had every intention on being together.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason the relationship falls apart, now we have to put feelings aside.
Yeah.
We have a child here that we need to care for. That it takes money to do that.
Yeah.
So the system, again, I think is great meeting that burden of proof.
Yeah.
But I guess somehow, based on monies that are coming in, sometimes the man has to pay for that monetarily. And unfortunately, there are some women who don't think the child should be with the father. And that is only, troubling in the long haul for the child because, I think children need to know both parents. And, it's not a matter of who did what. The child shouldn't have any information on that anyway. The mother should not be saying anything negative about the father, and the father shouldn't be saying anything about the negative, about the mother. But unfortunately, these things do happen. They do.
Now, if you dissect this to the point to where you're looking at it from a logical standpoint, now there are a lot of men, and this is why I'm assuming that some of these men are jumping ship or against the system. Why men do hysterical things to commit crimes, So I think what's happening here is there's a breakdown with the ability and you get with these women. It tells you even in the stats here that most females who end up pregnant or end up having children at early age is because of their father not being around or things like that. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't know if I 100% agree with that. I think there may be some truth in that, but, I think we live in a society now where, tradition has gone to the wayside. You look back at couples that were together, during the Great Depression, and they're still together today. I think the problem is it is so easy to walk away from a relationship nowadays with no commitment, with no desire to stay there and work through it. I think, it's too easy nowadays to just walk away, whether there's kids in that relationship or not. and this is why you see the dynamics of a family the way it is, more so in our own communities, more so than, across the spectrum. Yeah.
So I mean, we're defining the man in the 21st century, where most men are trying to, like I said, trying to provide, trying to be in charge, trying to rule, in a sense. And that's the dominance of most constructive men's thinking when they do see that things can be obtained, they can see wealth.
Right.
And it does take a strong man to be able to sit back and settle and be able to, be the communicator within his household. Now, you're married, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been married for how long now, Marlin?
Since 96.
And I noticed that in your writings, when you talk about this person, you give her respects for being there. Now, you guys have been through probably a lot of things, and I'm sure most marriages, when people find that loved one. Now, when you talk about marriage in the sense for a man to commit himself to a female now, what does that take, Marlin?
Well, I think it's compromise. I think it's communication. I think it's respect for the other person. I think there are a lot of things that go with that. Understanding and patience and, respect, definitely.
Yeah.
So the fundamentals of a relationship are, truly that sets the foundation of any relationship. Definitely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So how do you and your wife, this is important because most people, I couldn't stay married for, I think I had so many issues in my own communication. I said, I'm not perfect. I don't look at myself as a perfect being, but I think a lot of common sense kind of steered me away in the sense where I may have chose, maybe my decision was not right when it comes to women. I don't know. So what did you look for in your wife when you chose?
It's true that, whatever my weakness is, her strengths were. So, I think at the end of the day, it truly boils down to communication. Although we do play a role in a relationship, I think the fact that, we have open communication and we're allowed to say exactly what it is we feel. I think that's important. I think people often get bent out of shape or get upset because probably, sometimes the truth hurts. And, it's not so much what you say, but it's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you say it. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West. I am sparkless today. She is attending meetings, probably doing something in her own curricular time, but she is not on the show today. But it is me and Marlin Jones. He is talking about his book and the manhood in the 21st century. If you want to donate to the program or to any of the things that Method 8 does, you will be contributed. Everything goes to our films. You will be placing the credits. You can donate or find information at method8inc.com. It is method8inc.com. We cater to the arts, where we try to find a venue for people like me and Marlin to communicate and put their information out to the world. We also do a little business adventures as well. You're listening to The Media with Brian West. So Marlin, talk a little bit about, now we're talking about the humble side of, we talked a little bit about the humble side of manhood. Now there are some things about manhood right now that we're finding out that were not in the forefront before. Like when you talk about, we were talking about the position in the home, and we were talking about how most men can't find a way to express themselves or communication. Who were some of the men in your life that I think you looked up to,
Well, great question, because I recall, I thought about this more than a few times, but there were people in my high school, men of color that, and not of color, that have, often pulled me to the side and have given me some words of encouragement. And that was truly an eye-opener, because they saw something in me that maybe at that time that I didn't notice within myself to make me a better person. So they wanted me to be accountable for my behavior. So that was truly, because, I grew up without a father. I didn't know my father.
Yeah.
I knew of him, but I didn't really know him. So, And my older brother, who passed away, God rest his soul, was another person that I truly looked up to as that male role model in my life. And, you know, being around certain friends who had the father figure that would that really set a great example. That was, you know, he didn't have to say a word, but his presence was felt. So, so there were, you know, different times that different people kind of, you know, pulled me to the side to let me know that they were watching me.
Yeah,
and that's important, truly important.
So do you think it's important for a man to have a role model figure, whether it's a father, whether it's somebody on TV, whether it's a reverend or anything? Do you think that's important?
Oh, absolutely, because we don't know all the answers. You know, there are things in life that happen to us that sometimes we question about which road to choose or which way to go. So definitely, you know, sometimes that old expression are, you know, two heads are better than one, or you know, two eyes are better than one. So definitely.
Now I know in my household there were times where my father was not, well, my real, I didn't really know my real father, but my stepdad had stepped in, and there were times where I had to be the leader in the household. I know when I graduated, I know my goal was to try to get away. You know, I wanted to get out of the craziness because there was some crazy things. So tell us how it was for you when you were growing up and you did not have your father around all the time.
Well, you know, true. The greatest thing is the man that I mentioned in my book, which is my stepfather.
Yeah.
Loved my mother, and so much that he married my mom with 5 children, and we were like teenagers when we moved into his house. So he was definitely the father figure in my life at age 16. Well, actually, before that, like I think we moved into his home. I had to be between 12 and 13 at the time. So. And you know, I give homage and I pay respect for him, and I think I even thanked him in my book for loving my mother.
Yeah.
To this day, they're still together, and you know, there are times that I go to him just like a father and be like, you know what, you know, I need some sound advice. You know, emotionally, I know what I'm getting ready to do is probably not the right thing, so I need somebody to kind of give me some sound advice and direction, and Daddy's always done.
Okay, now let's get into this. This man, we're going to get a little deeper into the manliness. Now, I noticed, now this is for African, Caucasian, any man, there is a set of what I don't know if it's bitterness or a side to a man that the public does not see. Now, we've seen it come out in the forefront right now with I think was that was in Charleston what just happened?
Yeah.
Now, there are men. I talked to a few of. I have some Confederate friends who read and do things like that. There are men who don't believe in what they would call. I wouldn't say. What is it when you? I think is it when one man who is of another race marries a woman of another race, or
right, interracial,
interracial marriage. I'm sorry, I was looking for the word of. And then there's men who feel that is a wrong thing, and then they start getting into other people's business and things like that. And there are these men who hold bitterness inside them when it comes to the other race and things like that. And there's a lot of that, not just in America, but in the world, where men feel like they have to take drastic measures to be heard, you know.
Right.
And I think that is starting to see when we talk about this development of peace and diplomacy in this new day and age where people, even the Muslim faith and the Christian faith, people not being able to sit at the table and resolve solutions because of, now this has a lot to do with men because, you know, God gave us dominion over this earth. So
absolutely,
when you talk about this bitterness, this stronghold of a man to not be able to control this evilness inside of him, I mean, what is that? What is that when you talk about it? And how do men find a way to let this out? I mean, give it do you work out? I mean, give us some solutions to this problem.
Well, you know, unfortunately, you're right. I think over the past couple of years, we've been seeing these kind of things happen more and more and more. And interestingly enough, and probably much needed, but sometimes the conversation it doesn't continue.
Yeah.
There is probably a small percentage of people in this country and probably abroad that have this feeling of inferiority towards another race, and it's so unfortunate. I mean, just think about it. It was up until 1967 that in America, a black man or a white man could marry a black woman, or a black man could marry a white woman. I find that incredible. Like, I don't know if in Europe they have these interracial issues. Now, they may have a more secular versus religious type of back and forth, but I don't know if it's necessarily on a racial level like it is here.
Yeah.
And that's so unfortunate, because here we are in 2015, and these things still happen.
That's amazing,
But let me tell you what's interesting is, I think the media, I think the radio, and I think TV, they play a big part in that. It is true. The more stuff you show on TV about a certain race doing a certain thing, it is almost like this racial biasness that we develop. And we seem to think that it applies to everyone. And that's so unfortunate. So unfortunate. Yeah.
So in every situation, there's a solution. I mean, if you want to talk about in the biblical sense, where Moses married a woman of another, and that was forbidden, but God accepted it. Now we're talking about in this new environment where people fall in love. People feel, and when we talk about women in a sense, some women don't feel loved by their own race. And I think to me, honestly, I think God put all different types of people on the earth for a reason, because some people don't. There were times and I think in every man's life where he did not feel loved by his own complexion, by his own people. So, there's even old myths that talk about this, where people don't feel love. Now, these are men and women. So when we talk about that in a sense, when we go to the side where men and women, do you think that men and women have a respect for each other when we talk about this, men and just in general, and women?
Well, I think there is. I just think typically what we see on TV is the times in which we don't. Women are a very important part of our culture. Can you imagine if this world had no women in it?
Oh, man.
My point exactly, because women by nature are nurturers.
Yeah.
They're sometimes the most logical person. And I'll give you a medical fact. Women live 5 years longer than men.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah. Well, my dad told me one time, since it's Father's Day and we're talking about that, my dad told me one time, I'll never forget it, there was a female who, I've had some female friends over my life, and we were kind of getting to know each other, and I was not wanting to commit to her, because I didn't think she respected me. I didn't think I've had I haven't lost count on my fingers yet of girlfriends, but, but I let her go. I said, you know what, this is it. I can't take it anymore. Because sometimes these women, they get possessive, and they don't, I don't think they understand a man's mind. And I think sometimes when you try to explain things to them, they try to assume the masculinity role. So when we talk about, now you're you seem like a very open-minded poet and a very open-minded writer, to where you look at both sides of the fence here. So do you think that women are maybe disobedient to the role of men, or maybe men are disobedient to the role of women? Because there's a big miscommunication here. Some women cook, some women don't, some men cook. So where's the confusion?
Well, I think sometimes the lines are blurred on both sides. I think, look at some of the instances where the man definitely isn't taking care of his children. I mean, that leaves a salty taste in some women's mouths and how they deal with men moving forward, or, vice versa. So I think the respect, there should be some middle ground. There should be some boundaries. But But at the end of the day, one thing that we have to keep in mind is it's about communication, and it's about effective communication. It's about civil communication.
Yeah.
You know, I think people get turned off when they're yelled at, when there are condescending comments made to them. People just turn off, and that's not being effective. In order to be heard, you can have a truly productive conversation where you don't necessarily have to agree with everything, but it allows a person to hear whatever your qualms or your quarrels are, to kind of meet in the middle, because sometimes relationships are a little bit of compromise.
Yeah.
It truly is, as opposed to someone being dominant of a relationship. And, you know, I've come across women who have this kind of masculine, dominant feel to them because maybe the men that they've dealt with were weak in a sense.
Oh, wow.
You know, so
Yeah.
they have to kind of be both roles, or a male may be very passive and, you know, the woman is a little bit more aggressive or assertive. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you think it's important for a man to at least have some toughness in him, correct?
Well, I think a man should, you know, necessarily not be afraid to say no and speak his mind. And that doesn't, you know, you don't have to assert your authority by, you know, slamming your hand on the ground. It's like, you know, just be confident in your conversation and what you expect, and not so much be a doormat. You know, unfortunately, we see a lot of that today. We do.
I told you my dad told me in a sense, he said, Brian, women are stronger than men emotionally. Well, I'd say emotionally, but I see my dad, and my dad I never saw a weakness in my dad. He was always my stepdad. Right. He was always he never would show a side, but he showed a lot of aggression at times, and we had a hard time. Him and my mother at times couldn't get along. And I think, but one thing about me is I was never bitter. I was never aggressive. I never wanted to fight or get rid of or just jump into the fights or anything. But now that we live in a new environment, I think that it is becoming more prevalent that men and women are having a problem with their roles. And we talk about in America, where you talk about children not growing up with their fathers around, not knowing their biological father, growing up and seeing other families and things like that. And I think it does something to the child, you know, in a sense, to where they want. And so now that we talk about this, Marlin, where we're in this new society of ambitious and people who just want to, I don't know if it's rule the world or want to obtain all of this stuff, but they seem to forget about those little ones. What are your take on that, since you have children?
You know, there's a saying that says, let me get it right. Do as I say, don't do as I do. You know, because one thing, and I'll make even reference to the Bible. The Bible says we're the salt of the earth. And what that means is there's somebody always watching us.
Yeah.
So by virtue of what you say and by virtue of what you do, you can either bring people to Christ or deter them from Christ.
Yeah.
Or you can do the opposite. You can make children, you know, understand and learn something from it, or you can make them more defiant and more rebellious.
Yeah.
But that other saying is you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, too. So, you know, so there truly has to be a balance, and especially with these young children today. But now look at our TV. Everything is all reality TV, right?
Well,
and it's a false sense of reality. It's not even real life. But, you know, these people get paid to act out and to be malicious and mean to one another. And our society is taking this, and especially our young children who are impressionable, who already don't have a male figure in their life.
Yeah.
And this is what they look to as a way of the world. And it's unfortunate, but it doesn't work. Doesn't work.
And it was dad's responsibility to say, hey, it's time to go to bed, put them kids to bed. And now the man can't even discipline his child, you know. Right. So I mean,
and not even at home, but even in the school, even out in public, we can't.
Wow.
Because there's some retribution as a result from doing that.
That's amazing. I mean, it's just funny that you say that, because when we were growing up, I swear my dad never, only time I ever seen my dad get angry was when I'd bothered him when he was in the garage working. I never bothered my dad working, or he'd snap.
Right.
So that's, right. But the thing is he was around and you could feel that authority figure. So, right. I mean, what do you think a child goes through, especially not just a female, but a boy, when their father is not there, when they just, all they see is mom, and what do you think that? What do you? I mean, just from a poetic standpoint, since you were an author and things like that, what do you think a child goes through mentally?
Well, I think they're searching for something they can identify with. You know, little girls identify with their mom, but a boy can't identify with his mom. I mean, he recognizes the authority in the home, but we need to be able to identify with somebody who's just like us. Yeah. You know, you've heard the saying, a woman can't raise a son to be a man. They just can't. That's not their role to do. That's not their role.
Now, this is another thing, because when we talk about manhood, now, when you look at the big picture here, what happened even in Charleston, I bring that up because that's a big thing when you talk about manhood. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a 21-year-old kid who comes into a church with these are some pretty high-ranking officials in there that probably were members of the board and things like that. Now, this is a 21-year-old kid who comes into a church, and these now in the scriptures it talks about when the tribe of Levites, which was Aaron's tribe, was not supposed to be touched. They were not supposed to be, you're not supposed to. It was God's duty to handle them. So now we're talking about on the scale. This is on a 10 when you talk about the scale of what this does. This man went into a church. This young 21-year-old kid went into a church and shot the pastor and some of the congregation. Now this is a counselor, a man in charge, a man who has to raise orphans and things like that. And this is in America. So, I mean, your views on that as an author, I mean, what do you think about when you see that still be, now, do you think if this kid would have, I don't know his family situation, I don't know if his father was around, but I mean, that's a big thing, Marlin.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I believe that the young kids, I think his uncle spoke out in defiance of that. And you're right. I don't know where the father is either. But it sounds like there was some, and this wasn't confirmed as of yet, so this is just purely me going off the information that I have, that there was some white supremacy, some, feeling that, the people that he was invoking fear, and typically that's what terrorism does, or domestic terrorism, or whatever you want to call it, is supposed to do, is invoke fear of a people or a religion or whatever the case may be.
I was going to say that they said
it seems like he had some views.
Yeah, they said he said something like you've raped our women and I have to do this or something. So now that's that's what I'm saying. Now that's a big thing, because I think, in a sense, when you talk about that, especially in this new environment, maybe he saw something. I don't know, but when I came across this story, as I was dissecting, getting prepared for the show about manhood, I thought it would be important to bring that up, because every man battles with something, and there's men who, when you talk about this thing, in supremacy, we'll get to that in a second. Let me get to a quick tagline. We're about 10 minutes into the program. You're listening to The Media with Brian West and Alicia Sparks. Alicia is out today. I am talking to Marlin Jones, the author of The Definition of a Man. He is a poet, and he is a very accomplished man. He's married. He has kids. And if you want to donate to the program, you can always donate, or to our programs. We do everything. We try to cater to the people in the arts. You can always donate and become a sponsor at method8inc.com, or if you want to find out more about Method 8 and the Media8tor, go to method8inc.com. We're talking to Marlin Jones today about the definition of a man in the 21st century, the ability for a man, and we're talking a little bit about what happened in Charleston, and then we'll open up the floor to yourself a little bit. So before we get into a little bit of yourself, now when we talk about that situation, this man probably did not grow up with a lot of fatherly figures around, and probably is embedded in his mind that there are supreme beings on the planet and that everything that every being does is causing a problem. So we're talking about African American men, and we're talking about white males, and we're talking about just all different types of males in general, having this belief that there has to be a way of life in a sense, and has to be order, and everybody is causing a problem. That sounds to me like a delusion. I'm not even gonna lie to you.
Right.
It sounds like a delusion. So we've talked about that a little bit. Let's talk about yourself, Marlin. You have done a lot of things. You've been in the military. Your brother served, and you're married now. So tell us a little bit about your personal life. What are some of the things that you're getting into in the future?
Oh, wow. Well, I have actually quite a few things going on. My son just graduated high school, and my daughter graduates next year. So that's truly a milestone in itself, with the statistics regarding people who graduate from high school, especially in this day and age. So, so that is coming to pass, and they are planning on going to college, which I'm so excited about. So I currently have 2 books out. I'm working on 2 more. I do some modeling. I do have an agent, so I do a little bit of commercial print, some catalog stuff, some voiceover stuff I've been known to be a part of. I actually have my own clothing line. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
So where can people we usually in the last 10 minutes to give you an idea, we kind of open up the floor to the guests to kind of let people know what it is that they're doing and things like that. So how can people get into your circle and get some of your clothing?
Well, I can tell you my website is www.taylorblue.com. That's TAYLORDBLU.com. And let me give you some background on the name. My daughter's name is Taylor. My favorite color is blue. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool? It's just like a tailored suit. So Taylor Blue is how the name came about. So that is my website. My Instagram is Taylor Blue as well. And my Twitter is @Marlin Andre. So so there are different outlets. I do have a Facebook account which I don't maintain. My graphic designer does. And that's at Taylor Blue as well. So
you seem like you're doing an excellent job out here. I know you said you had you've been in some of you were working with is it Eddie Murphy's ex-wife?
Yeah, Nicole. Well, Jamie Jackson, which is her assistant, had reached out to me. I met her at I didn't meet her, but to my understanding, I did meet Nicole Murphy. They were at the Noche Fashion Week show in New York City this past February. And I was a part of the show, and I was able to dress a few of the NFL and NBA players there. And actually, my line was a part of a private show that was at, I believe it was at the Attic nightclub in downtown Manhattan. So since then, I've done some stuff with, or for Vivica Fox, a gentleman by the name of Mark Forrest and Savoy Walker. I actually dressed them for a VH1 special that was honoring Vivica Fox called Unsung Hollywood. So I managed to do that.
You seem very professional, man. I remember I came out to one of your signings at the mall, Southern Park Mall. You were in there, and you seem like you're very. I'm very proud of you, man. I'm sure your brother is probably shining down. I mean, you seem to be taking on the role. Your kids are graduating now. How does that feel?
Oh my God! Well, I keep telling people I'm 18, so. Much like my mother, who's still 29. So I guess in theory I'm older than my mom. But I don't know. I think it's, age is a mindset. I still feel young, got a lot of life left in me, and so I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have you on the show, and I mean, in all actuality, like in the sense what we talked about, we've discussed today, this is a man-to-man conversation. I'm sure it must have been divine will that it was meant this way. So when we talk about the manhood in this new environment, and we see a lot. You can tell the differences when it comes to men's maturity levels and the things that they do at an early age and as they grow. I know myself, I've learned a lot in my lifetime. I've learned to have patience more than anything, because I've seen a lot of things, and I've seen a lot of things where I said, this could have been resolved if it would have been this way.
Right.
And I think a lot of matters when we talk about this new environment of men who, some men grow up a little bit effeminate, some men grow up a little bit too masculine. But when we talk about that as men, in a sense, like I said, King Solomon, I think, put it the best. He says everything in life is meaningless, but he says without God in your life, I think that is the big thing. So when we talk about men who don't live, it's evident that you can see that this, when we have to use the Charleston thing, because I think this is a pivotal point in history, right? Well, in time, to where we see things like this happen, where this man obviously did not have knowledge of the foundation of church, which is, do you think church plays a important part in a man's life?
Oh, my God, no doubt about it. When I was a young kid, I didn't have a choice. I was going to church. And, I thank my grandmother, God rest her soul, and my mom for that, because it's true. I mean, I think, even with my own children, one thing I used to make them do, and hopefully they're still doing it today, is they pray before they eat. We have to give thanks to our Creator, to our God first.
Yeah.
And then, He'll take care of the rest. As long as we trust in Him and have faith, He'll take care of the rest. So I think that is what this country is truly missing. As you see, they're taking God out of everything. Everything. And look at the turmoil in this country that we have today as a result.
Well, in the script, I've been in scripture. I think it was meant for me to do that. It was amazing how I was raised. I mean, my mother kept me contained. I did not know a lot of things until I got, I think, the age of 18, when my sister convinced her to let me go out and play with my cousins. My cousins were very rough. They probably roughed me up so bad. But I think the foundation that my mother set when I was growing up, and my father had a lot to do with it too. But my mother was a great communicator when we talk about that. But in the sense of manhood, she made sure, her and my grandmother made sure that I knew that God had to be in my life, no matter what it was. And I think that most men are forgetting that sense. And like I said, I don't understand how a person could not fathom the ability of God's influence in people's lives. I mean, you talk about philosophers, you talk about some of the greatest, the people who wrote the Bible, these were wise people to be able to write down this, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So now they see, I think the experiment is going wrong, and now what do you think we could do to fix it, Marlin?
Well, I wish I had the answer to that. I think we're at a point of no return. But I think one thing that we have the ability and power to do is, we have to take care of our home first. And by doing that, then we go out and we do one person at a time. I think the world changes one person at a time.
Absolutely.
And it may not be where we want it to be, but that's how it's going to start. And that's how we're going to continue to save young people in the long run.
Excellent.
I think they're starving for discipline. I think they're starving for leadership. I think they're starving for something that they don't even understand. The Bible says our understanding is not like His own. So the things from our carnal point of view, we don't understand the dynamics of the things that happen in this world. The Bible says the things that are against us are not flesh and blood, but they're spirits and heavenly realms. There's some truth in that.
Yeah, there is. Well,
yes.
Well, Marlon, I want to thank you for coming on the show. This is an excellent topic to have on Father's Day. I want to wish you and your family the best Father's Day. I hope your kids are catering to you on today. I'm sure they're split. I'm sure they're flourishing you with gifts and thanking Daddy for being around. But I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I want to thank everybody for tuning into the Mediator. And Marlon, I want to congratulate you on your books, and I look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you so much for tuning to the Mediator. For coming on the Mediator, Marlon.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Everybody have a good week. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator with Brian West and Alicia Sparks. Have a good week, everybody.
listening to News Talk 790 WPIC. Sharon Hermitage, a Cumulus station, sponsored by the Ridgewood at Shenango Valley, a premier senior living residence.